Hi, this is Adi. My name is Adebola Oyinloye, and this is my presentation. Welcome to Dr. Macready, and I hope you kind of like enjoy my presentation. I hope it's not going to be tough, but give me a second. Let me try to connect to my um, slideshow. Here we go. Good. So this capstone is based on credit check and identity management system in Nigeria. And this is my capstone. Uh, okay, so my capstone is basically written based on one of my understanding of the challenges that Nigeria face, and Nigeria remain one of the most challenging environment for any entrepreneur to start up a business and thrive. Not just any kind of business. I'm talking about a business relationship between people to people, customer to customer, business to people, B2C, and business to business. Take, for instance, the kind of challenge we're talking about here from customer to customer, people to people is nanny. Nigeria has an expanding middle class, and when you say expanding middle class, we're talking about people, men and women going to work, doing 9 to 5, not having enough time for childcare, and they require the services of nanny. And how do you get a credible nanny? This is a very challenging. It, this is a very challenging situation in Nigeria for people. B2C in the United States, eBay started about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, whatever, I can't remember, but eBay started. And when eBay started, people thought eBay was going to go bankrupt. It wasn't going to be a successful business. Why they said that is eBay started on a business module that looks at an individual trying to sell an item that they're not using anymore. And then they send a bad, people thought the person is going to send a bad product. And in response, the person buying the item is going to send a bounce check. Fortunately, this didn't happen. Why? Because the United States is just like every other Western nation, is full of trusted people that are cooperating between themselves. And when you have a society or a population of people that have people that cooperate within themselves and trust each other, you have a booming economy. We do not have that in Nigeria. B2B is another challenge that is business to business is another kind of environment whereby you have challenges in transaction. And when I say business to business, I'm talking about um, uh, people that own businesses that are doing transactions, for instance, with banks, and they go to the bank to get some loan from the bank and default on the loan on the bank. For instance, a news report came out of Nigeria 2 months ago that says that out of the total 15 billion debts, internal debts Nigeria owes, about 350 people owe $12 billion, which means Nigeria is a population of 180 million people. Excuse me. Nigeria is a population of 180 million people. Out of that 180 million people, 70 million people are unbankable. So that leaves us with 108 million people. Out of that 108 million people that do banking transactions, 350 people only, not 350,000, 350 people only own $12 billion in Nigeria. So that's a challenging situation. How are they able to do this? They go with their business, get a loan from a bank A, do not pay the bank A, go with the same documentations to bank B, get a loan from bank B, do not pay bank B, do the same thing on bank C, and unfortunately, B and C cannot credibly cross-check the identity of people that own the business. I mean, even if they can cross-check, they cannot reliably come up with an information that adequately describe the kind of people that run the business that is taking these loans from these banks, that enables them to default. This is a graphical representation of what I was talking about. 108 million people are banking and 72 million people are unbankable. And if you look to the left of the graph, the bar chart, you can see the graph that shows just 350 people owing $12 billion, and the remaining 108 million people owing just $3 billion out of the total debt of $15 billion that was recorded as of 2018 being owed by internet debt in Nigeria. Now, my capstone analysis is based on a paper written to identify the multiple systems that the Nigerian government presently uses in establishing citizens' identity. And the capstone is going to provide an analysis of this system, including the strengths, weaknesses, and look for a possible way to create an alternative system that would ensure people within the Nigerian environment are identifiable and their background are credibly checked. Now, when you talk about an identity, we're talking about what can be used to classify identity. We have the social demography, which describes the gender, the age, sex, tribe, ethnic of the person, the kind of benefits that these groups within the identity or the identity within this group are looking after. Take, for instance, the social security is a group within the United States that describe the kind of people that have the benefit that can have access to the benefit of social security within the United States. Another kind of category that can be used to identify people in an environment or a population is the behavior exhibited. And part of how to determine the kind of behavior people exhibit is the spending pattern, the kind of product that they own. Do they have a car? Do they have mortgage? What kind of spending activities do they engage in? Do they go to the shop? Do they like Costco? All those kind of categories can be used to define the kind of identity we are. I mean, it creates an ability to construct a profile of an identity based on any of these components. In the United States, how do the United States collect people's identity? The primary identification is a driver's license. Even though the driver's licenses are issued by state or region, it is nationally recognized. And what that means is if you get a driver's license in California, you can use it temporarily in New York. Not just that, you can use your driver's license in California, your California driver's license to travel to anywhere within the United States. That makes the driver's license almost like, even though it's not official, like a national recognized identity documentation. The social security number is another nationally recognized identification. However, the social security number do not verify an identity. Even though the social security cannot verify an identity, it is a critical piece of information, because with that social security number, I mean, obviously you cannot bring out the social security number and say, hey, this is me, this is Adebola, no. But that social security number can actually link Adebola Oyinloye, who has a bank account with Wells Fargo, and link the same Adebola to a driver's license and link into the passport and whatever other kind of documentation. That's how critical the social security number is. There's also the passport card, or the international passport, which is a form of identity recognized in the United States. The passport looks at, it is strictly for people that are traveling out of the United States. I mean, the United States has about 350 million people. Only 60 million people has an international passport. So obviously, this does not cover the major group of people because 60 million people is really small, but it's still a recognized primary identification within the United States. There are other kind of secondary identification, which is the voter's card, the credit card. I have a debit card with Bank of America that has my picture on it. I can use it as an ID card. There's an insurance card, there's a private membership card, which is such as your Costco card, your library, I mean, bonds, all of these. Yeah, I mean, even professional certification courses like the CCNA, Cisco, they all have cards that can be used as a secondary identification, even though none of these can be used to publicly. You cannot use it credibly to identify yourself within the United States. Now, I want to talk about the credit system. The credit system is one of the systems created within the past 100 years in the Western nation that has enabled most of the world developed countries in the Western world to have developed. What the credit system does is it expands the purchasing power of people. When people have access to money, they're able to buy more things, and the more people buy, the more the economy expands. This is a quote directly from Butler, 2009. Now, with a credit system that enables people to buy more things, that kind of environment thrives. Nigeria do not have that kind of do not have a credit system that enables that kind of thriving environment. Now, what makes up the credit system, and why is the credit system successful in a society like the United States? There's a credit bureau that checks out for the financial recklessness of an individual. It checks out the financial responsibility of an individual. There's also a cross-dimensional background check that checks the criminal record, the sex offense, and and checks for all that kind of background information of an individual. Take, for instance, the background check checks for the employment verification of an employee seeking employment. In Nigeria, you do not have way to credibly identify if someone graduated from whatever school that they claim that they graduated from. This is easy to come by in the United States. You cannot have that in Nigeria. So you can have someone you employ, and in 2 years, the person is not able to perform the kind of job that they claim that they can achieve. They're not able to do this. And part of the reason why this has gone on for that long is because you were not able to credibly or at a speed verify the person's educational qualification. Not just that, there are also other kind of challenges that we experience with the background check and do the tenant screening system. One problem we experience in Nigeria is you can have a tenant come in and they pay for like a year, and after a year they're unable to pay the rent for the apartment that they get in. Now they move the legal system in Nigeria subsumes that everybody is fair, and you cannot easily evict a tenant. So while you're in the court process trying to evict the tenant, this could go on for like 6 months. So within that 6 months, the landlord is not making his money, the tenant is living rent free, and maybe 6 to 1 year, the whole process goes out and the tenant goes on to another apartment. Now, if you have a credible background check, you can check the kind of address history, the history of the tenant, and you can know, oh, so this is a serial rent-seeking tenant, and you can try to avoid renting your apartment to the individual. This is not a system that is not available in Nigeria. If we create that kind of system, it enables people to live morally upright. In Nigeria, oh, give me a second. Okay, got it. In Nigeria, Nigeria also have its own way of identity of verifying its identity. We have the BVN, we have the driver's license, we have the passport and the voter's card. The driver's license, passport, and voter's card resembles whatever you have in the United States, even though there are some challenges in those three categories that I mentioned: the driver's license, passport, and voter's card. Those things can be forged. However, the BVN, which is the banker verification number, is a little bit exclusive in terms of credibility. This was a system that was developed or designed in the last 6 to 10 years, and it has proven to be credible, because what it does is it has been able to eliminate multiple identity for an individual. Unfortunately, this only exists in people that are bankable. And remember, at the beginning of the slide, I mentioned that there are only 108 million people that have bank accounts in Nigeria. So 108 million people, if they have a bank account, they only have one identity. But this is a system that is only used in the banking industry. Now, the federal government of Nigeria created the National Identity Management Commission to tackle the identity challenge in Nigeria. And one of the mandates is to ensure all of this. If you look to the left of the screen, the primary identification, all of this information, source of identity documentation, are synced into one. So if you have a driver's license and a passport and you have a BVN, or you have one or either or none or two, three of all of this documentation, they are synced and integrated into just one identity, and a national identity number is generated for that individual. Now, this looks kind of like similar to the Social Security that we have in the United States. So that way, that's the Nigerian government, the federal government, can be able to identify individuals. Now, this was a commission that was started 10 years ago. Why is it not still working? There are the usual problems with funding. The Nigerian government has not been able to allocate enough funds to NIMC for them to be able to perform the duties. They don't have the willpower to follow through. And of course, corruption. We don't have to go into corruption. Corruption is just one of the killers of any positive development that can go on in Nigeria. So AO Incorporation, which is our company, is looking at designing a cost-effective and efficient solution that looks at just a limited scope of work. What are we looking at? We're looking at designing is a system or a solution that takes care of the most challenging need of an average Nigerian in the Nigerian environment. We're looking at the nanny solution. We're looking at employment verification. All of this I've described. The credit check. Now, the credit check is a little bit on the side. It's not as expansive as what the Experian is, because we're not sure what the legal implication of this is going to be with the Nigerian government. But it's going to be something like the Credit Karma, which is not necessarily an authoritative, but it's also authoritative in terms of you can check your you can check your credit rating or score through Credit Karma. Well, I mean, if you go out and buy a car, that's what they're going to use to determine if you're credible. They're not going to log into Experian. Another angle we're going to be looking at is a tenant screening, which looks at the challenges that I already described in terms of how to screen the kind of tenants you're going to be putting up in your apartment. So in graphical forms, this is briefly what the AO Incorporation Service is going to be looking at: nanny background check, employee verification solution, credit check, tenant reference check. And part of being able to identify that this whatever you're checking is credible. We'll be checking the driving history of the individual, 5-year criminal records, 5-year address history. Why 5 years? I'm not sure you can get more than 5 years address history of any individual within Nigeria. We're going to be looking at past sex offenses, if they had court cases, the job competencies. I mean, if you have to make phone calls to wherever they have worked before to confirm that, that's going to be included in the services that AO Incorporation Services will be delivering. We're also going to be looking at the credit history, the paying habit, and the bankruptcy of that individual. I mean, you can imagine having an employee that is the CFO of your organization. If you're going to be employing someone that is a CFO, you have to make sure they have a credible credit history and they have a good paying habit. You cannot, I mean, just imagine having a CFO that owes a lot of debt, negligence in paying on time on his credit, um, credit cards. All those behaviors are not what you want your CFO of your organization to have. We will be looking into things like that. Of course, we'll be looking at the tenant's reference check, which checks the rental behavior and rental ability. Can this person pay this bill? Where they've lived in the last 5 years, have they been paying their rent on time? If so, good. Welcome to AO Incorporation Services. The system, this is limited. I mean, obviously, because of time, I'm not going to be able to expand on how the system is going to be designed, but obviously there's going to be the web interface, the CLI interface, there's going to be the IDM application server, the firewall, which if you expand a little bit as an IT person, we're talking about the routers, the switches, we're looking at other kind of systems that are in between to protect the network. We're looking at local databases. And if you look at the top of the local database, I put in the AWS cloud. Why? We're looking at having a system that reaches across the 36 states in Nigeria. And that 36 states, we're not going to be having local services, like local servers everywhere. This information will be loaded onto the AWS Amazon Web Services cloud. And from there, you can reach, as long as the internet service, you can reach any kind of information that you'll be seeking or imputing into the IDM, the identity management system of the AO Incorporation. So the project management, of course, there's going to be the project manager, which is going to be me. There's the project team, the project development team, the application developer who is going to be in charge of creating the software for this application that we'll be using. There's the IT solution architect, which I deliberately put that kind of job function, the title role, IT solution architect. This is someone that is going to be in charge of the networking, the physical networking, the kind of, if it's fiber, the kind of servers and everything. This solution architect is going to be designing the system that the IDM solution will be running on. There's going to be the operations and the communication. The operation is going to be the person in charge of the logistics and everything that regards moving around and human resources of this particular project. Communication is key. We're talking about having an interaction with the federal government of Nigeria. Obviously, there's going to be the bureaucracy that is going to slow things down. But if you have a good communication team on your projects, it should be easy to have direct communication. Key communication will be established between the Nigerian government, irrespective of whatever bureaucracy that will be an hindrance to that kind of communication. This communication person within the project is going to be able to establish a communication link that is instant and intuitive and responsive. And then we have the project team integration team, the project integration team. I'm sorry, I made a little bit of mistake on that. The project integration team is the team that is going to be directly involved in interfacing our IDM solution with the with the Nigerian central identity management system. If we go back a little bit, we're talking about this. Remember, I mentioned that the national identity management system is seeking to bring together all forms of identification within the Nigerian system and generating an individual number for an individual person. If that is it, that is this NIMC commission. That's where our system will be integrating with. Okay, so there's a project schedule. We're estimating about 6 months between November to February. And if you look at the milestone, this is it. There's going to project kickoff, web hosting. If you look at at some point in November, there's going to be like a project meeting. I mean, obviously people are working from all over the world. A couple of people in the United States, people traveling between states and Nigeria. There's going to be some international travel. At some point, there will be some meeting, and the meeting will be a little bit of physical and through Skype. There's going to be the system integration. Sometime in January, there's going to be the uploading most of the services onto the AWS cloud. And just before go live, the project management team would meet one more time to ensure the beta has passed. The total cost of projects is $884,000. The breakdown is right there, and I think this is pretty cheap for what these projects intend to achieve. We're looking at a partnership whereby this project is going to be increasing the human flourishing for Nigeria and creating a base for a credit system that makes every individual people living in Nigeria flourish. And on the return, this AON Corporation is going to be making money by providing the services at a cost. So it's a symbiotic relationship. This is about the end. I try to limit this is like the third time I'm doing this presentation, and I try to limit it to a few minutes. This is the end of my project. I hope it meets the requirements, and thank you for listening to me.